So I pretty much want to just get on here for a little bit and tell you guys kind of what's been going on because I've been MIA for a while now, and I kind of want to get into detail what's been going on, why I haven't been around. Just everything's been kind of crazy in life. Work's been really crazy, and then I'll get into the story. I'll make a long story short. The Thursday before Christmas, my dad called me up. I was on my way home from work. I'd worked late that night, and we had mandatory overtime. So he called me up, and usually I call my mom on my way home from work. She wasn't answering her phone, and it was weird that my dad was calling me instead. And so I answered the phone. He said, "Hey, Krista, your mom's acting really weird. She's mumbling, holding her stomach, and she's hallucinating, and I don't know what's going on. Like, should I call the ambulance? What do you think?" And I automatically was like, yeah, we need to call an ambulance. Like, we need somebody to get over here and talk to us, take her to the hospital right away. Apparently earlier that day they had gone to the hospital, but she was in so much pain that she couldn't wait any longer. It was like a 3-hour wait to get into the ER. And finally they just gave up and went home. And so she went home, got worse and worse and worse. And so I rush over to my parents' house. They're about 20 minutes away from where I work. And I beat the ambulance there. And they come in and they're like adamant there's nothing wrong with my mom. My mom's sitting there in her chair, just rocking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, holding her stomach. And just like, you can tell something's wrong. And so I was like, okay, she's had this issue in the past. She had dual knee surgery back in 2011, and she ended up having a infection, and she went septic without showing the signs of sepsis, like the external signs of sepsis. So I said that to him, and he was like, no, that's not what it is. That's not a thing. You always show signs of sepsis, no matter how much sepsis you have. And I was like, well, this is what the doctor, no, you're wrong. She just has a stomach bug. It's been going around. All the old people are getting it. Give her NyQuil, go put her to bed. She'll be fine in the morning. Fine, whatever. You're the expert, dude. Fine, I'll put her to bed. And so I put her to bed, and my dad went and got some NyQuil because we didn't have any in the house, and that's what he told us to get. And I finally got her undressed into bed and relaxing, and Dad came with the NyQuil and gave it to her. I mean, she went Linda Blair with that crap. I mean, she went everywhere with it. Like, it was black stuff coming up. And I was like, no, something's wrong with my mom. So I did a 10-step psychological eval on her, and she failed 9 out of the 10. The only one she passed was who is the president, and then she growled. So technically, I don't think that counts. So I called them back up. I met them at the top of the steps. My dad let them in. And I told my dad, I was like, I want to talk to them. I met them at the top of the steps. And I said, welcome back, gentlemen. I may not be an expert or a medical professional, but I'm an expert on my mom, and something's going on with her. So we're taking her to the ER. And she's a fall risk. My mom's had dual knee surgeries. She's a bigger woman having trouble walking. She's been falling a lot lately. So I've been having to, in all of my spare time, take care of her, be there with her on weekends and nights and stuff like that after I get off of work. And they're like, no, we can't carry her out of this house. We're going to make her walk under her own free will down 16 steps through the house and out into the garage where they finally had a gurney. And it was the most harrowing thing I could possibly do. We finally took her to the hospital, and we checked her in. They're like, well, they're just going to put her in the lobby and leave her, and they're not going to see anything about it. Well, suddenly, me and my dad drive up and get in, and she's all checked in. Suddenly, she's in a room, not in the lobby. I wonder what's going on here. Okay, so we go back with her and see what's going on. And she's in a bed. She's not quite acting herself. She's having to go to the bathroom a lot. It just acting funny. Like, she completely was dazed out and confused and just not herself. So I ended up taking a video of her and when the nurses and the doctors weren't around, and it was just her kind of sitting on the toilet, and she was kind of like completely dazed out. And I recorded it and I showed it to the first nurse I could find. I was like, you got to listen to my story, okay? I lost my mom for 2 weeks back in 2011 because she had dual knee surgery, and she went into surgery with UTI and went septic after the fact. We lost her for 2 weeks. Please don't let that happen again. I need somebody to believe me this time, because I was 23. Nobody believed me. And I was just fighting them the whole entire time. And she was like, okay, we're going to see what's going on. Could it be a psychotic break? No. My mom has mental issues, but this isn't her when she has a psychotic break or anything like that. And finally, they ended up breaking down and doing a CT of her head to see if it was a stroke, or CT of her stomach. And something came back with a CT of her stomach, and they pulled me aside and they're like, hey, there looks like to be something wrong with her stomach. There's like air bubbles outside of her like stomach. Okay, that doesn't sound normal. And they're like, well, she's got a perforation, it looks like. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to talk to the doctors and we're going to see what's going on. Okay. And so they went off and talked to their surgeon people. And this took like 4 hours, mind you. In between that and between that time, me and my dad were stuck in a room in the back of the ER. It was one that was one of the older rooms, and come to find out, the nurse button, call button, wasn't connected into the main nurse's table. It was just in the little nurse break room. And so my mom started getting worse and worse as the night progressed. And she got more and more violent and more erotic, erratic and everything like that. And at one point, she's just they're like, keep her in bed. She's a fall risk. We got to keep her in bed. And she was adamant about getting out of this bed. So it was my job, according to the doctors, and my job, according to the nurses, to keep her in that bed. And if you guys know, I walk with a cane. I'm not very comfortable on my own 2 feet, but I'm pretty strong. I mean, I did ballet, tap, jazz, and lyrical all of my life. I lift weights, all that jazz. I did all of that growing up. So I'm not the weakest person I possibly could be, but it's been a while since I've been that strong. And so it's between me and my mom, and I'm trying to keep her in bed, and she's adamant about getting out. And I am pressing the button as many times as I possibly can. Nobody's coming. Finally, I send my dad screaming down the hallway, because it's a very long hallway. And he leaves me there with my mom. I'm struggling to keep her in bed, and she's pummeling the crap out of me. She just wants to get out of that bed. And so I'm keeping her, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, somebody come help me. This happens twice, in fact. And they sedate her. Nothing really helps with the sedation. It happens the second time. She's still not sedated. And finally, they come back and say there's a perforation in her duodenum, which is the bottom of her stomach, bottom of her stomach, top of her large intestine. And they're going to talk about doing emergency surgery. And I'm like, okay, well, can we do something about this? No. You're fine back here. She's sedated enough. We've given her enough medicine to knock a grown woman out. Well, no. It happened a third time. I screamed bloody murder through I got punched right here and right here by my mom as hard as she possibly could. And she's never hit me in my whole entire life. I can't even remember a time that she was mad enough to punch me like that in her whole entire life. And so they come rushing in. They end up strapping her to the bed with these straps, strap her down to the bed. They end up moving her into a front room, because this is the third time now that she's been all crazy like this, beating the crap out of me, and nobody listened to me. I'm breaking down, sitting in the hallway, just not quite sure what to do. And one of the nurses was sweet enough. She was like, she's not her right now. It's going to be okay. And then they rush off, and they're getting her prepped for emergency surgery all of a sudden. They put a GI tube in her, and automatically, this black stuff is coming out of her and getting sucked into this like vat of like, you know, those sucky things that you see on the walls in ERs. She filled up 1/2 of those with this black coffee ground looking crap. She was septic completely. Nothing was being able to go through her stomach and through her system because it was so swollen and the sepsis was so bad that nothing was able to go through her entire system. So they were having to pull it completely out because she was that sick. And so they did emergency surgery. They were going to go in arthroscopically and see what's going on, see if they could fix it. They ended up having to completely cut her open from sternum to belly button in order to open her up and completely find it. Well, come to find out, she had a gallstone that she had her gallbladder out in like 2009, 2010, when Joey and I got married, like right before. And it had stayed in her system and then perforated the lining of her lower stomach and caused her to get sepsis. And they told us, well, this is a very risky surgery. We might lose her because she's very advanced in the sepsis. We don't know if she's going to wake up from this. So, of course, we prepared ourselves. I was bawling my eyes out. And I think it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do because me and my dad had joint power of attorney. And both of us had to sign the paperwork. And it's like, if you ever have to do that for a parent or somebody that you love, it's the worst because you're trying to do the best for them, but you don't know if that's what is the best for them. And so they went through the surgery. I ended up passing out on the ICU. First, we got her up to pre-op. It took me, my dad, and another 3 gentlemen from pre-op to get my mom back in bed because she went to the end of the bed with the strap still on, broke through the straps and down the bed. And so she was at the end of the bed trying to get off and just being nuts. And my dad kneeled down in front of her, keeping her from going on the bed, and just said, baby, you got to listen to me. Please listen to me and listen to them and get back on this bed so that you can get better. Please get back on this bed. And she kind of went a little limp. And then she ended up putting a foot on my dad's chest and pushing back from there and getting back in bed. And they strapped her back down. And we ended up having to cut off her nightgown because she was still in her nightgown and ruined one of her favorite nightgowns, which made her very sad after the fact. And they did emergency surgery on her. And my husband, my dad, and I, and my father-in-law, who actually dropped my husband off, all hung out in the ICU waiting room. The surgery started finally at 5:30 in the morning, and she was out by 11. And I ended up passing out and falling asleep on the ICU waiting floor because I'd been up over 24 hours by that point. And it was really rough. When she came out of surgery, she ended up going to the ICU. And she was on a ventilator, and they weren't sure if she was going to wake up. And they were like, okay, why don't you guys go home? She's not going to wake up anytime soon. We're going to keep her on the vent and make sure that she's healing right first. And so we went home. My husband took me home. I ended up passing out and going to sleep for quite a long time. Ended up calling over to ICU 6 p.m. that night. And they said they had finally taken her off the vent. It was either that night or the next morning. I forget which. Just everything's a blur. But she still wasn't quite her. They put her on antibiotics, and she was in ICU for over a week. And she still wasn't quite her. She ended up finally slowly coming back to us. And she got put into step down, and she started getting better. And she had to be tied down to the bed because she had a GI tube in her nose. And every time that they untied her, she would try to rip it out. And so that was really rough to see. To see my mom completely swollen up, her hands looked like sausages because the amount of fluids they were having to pump into her. And it's just really rough. So finally, around New Year's, they put her in a regular hospital room, and she started getting better enough that she could get up and out of bed a little bit, but they wouldn't allow her to do it by herself. But they were really crap to her there. First time I walked in there when they moved her, her whole room was a mess. And there was gloves on the floor and just crap all over the floor. And my mom can't get out of bed all by herself. So you know it's not her that's making this mess. And then there's a bedpan in the toilet sideways with poop still in it. And so I had to fight with them to get that cleaned up. And I'm already telling them that she's a risk for another further infection. She just got over sepsis. Like, she can't do this. And that night, they ended up not checking her IV correctly, and it punctured through, it blew out a vein, and it kept going into her arm for almost 12 hours afterwards. And when they finally found it, they pulled it out and didn't do anything for it. Like, put a hot pack on it for a while. And that ended up getting infected. And so they had put her on antibiotics again and completely dig out all the tissue that had become infected in her arm, and had to pack it and everything. So that was a whole nother thing that became quite the issue. And it's just been kind of rough having to be there, not exactly having to be there for my mom, but wanting to be there for my mom and get her through this and get her better. And of course, we missed Christmas, we missed New Year's, and she ended up moving into a skilled nursing facility a couple weeks ago, and she just came home on Friday. And she spent her birthday, which was on the 14th of January, in the skilled nursing facility being treated like an old person. And finally on Saturday, yesterday, the 19th, we finally got to celebrate Christmas almost a month later. And I can't tell you how exciting it is to finally have your family home and in the place that they need to be. Not quite the best that they possibly could be, but enough that they could be home. And the amount of sacrifice that it takes to do that. To me, it's completely and utterly worth it. Yeah, I missed out on a lot of being able to hang out with you guys and being able to record and everything like that. But in the end, I only have one mom. And I only have one dad. I only have one husband. I only have my family in the end. And if I don't take care of them, then who am I? And so kind of that's what's been going on since the Thursday before Christmas. I've had to take off a lot of work. We've accrued a lot of bills as a result. And Joey's still not working, so it's just me. And now we're having to get my mom a wheelchair because she can't walk. And so that's been really tough, trying to figure out things and paying all those bills and making sure to work with insurance. Thankfully, I work in insurance, so I know what to do. But just making sure that she's okay in the long run is going to be worth it. And keeping myself distracted and keeping myself healthy as well is another thing as well. So, well, I just wanted to tell you guys what was going on, and things are going. I'm going to be streaming, if you want to check it out, over on Twitch and on YouTube tonight with Haley and Petunia and Wix and Cozy Air and a couple other people. If you guys want to come check it out. If I didn't completely depress you with my story, come check it out. Till next time, as always, I love you guys so much. I'm Krista. Bye-bye.